Okay, so Rabbi Yitzchok, good morning. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the viewers on Torah Anytime. So someone posed to me a very sensitive and uncomfortable shiloh. These types of scenarios, you have to hope that they don't view Torah Anytime. But the shiloh was as follows. It's a parent who is having a very strained relationship with their child. And the parent has made a decision that the parent would like to disinherit the child. The parent is writing up the tzava, the last will and testament, and consulting with an attorney, and is bequeathing a substantial sum to other children, but one particular child the parent would like to disinherit. Unfortunately, this is not a contrived shiloh, it's a real life scenario. And it's something that, a Rav, should really lose sleep over because it's not a simple matter. It's really not a simple matter, and it plagued me. It really bothered me. There happens to be that there's a Beferish Mishnah. The Mishnah in Baba Basra, Daf Kuf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis. The Mishnah says that if somebody wants to perpetrate such a deed, so Masha Asoy Asoy, whatever the person did, it's a fait accompli. The person is technically allowed to do it, but ein ruach chachamim noach mimenu. Ein das ruach chachamim noach mimenu. The person is doing something that is connected to Chazal, it's connected to rabbis. The chachamim would frown upon such an action. However, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that if the children or the child is not acting keshura, is not acting in an appropriate manner, then Zachar Latov, then the parent is remembered for the good. Is that the parent has done something that is right and has done something within the law, hasn't violated any law. Now, the Gemara says that a parent should not disinherit a child. It's a Beferish Gemara. The Gemara does say it. But it seems not to be a halacha midaraisa. It seems not to be a din midaraisa. And it says that a parent also should not change the inheritance laws to the degree that even giving tzedakah, where a parent chooses to say, well, I'm going to give most of the assets and most of my resources to tzedakah, and I'm not going to give the bulk of the money to the children. Not so simple. The Ramah says that one is allowed to do it. Rabbi Kiva said not more than a third should be given to tzedakah. The Aruch HaShulchan says half. Many poskim advocated that at least 10% of one's will should be given for tzedakah. But for a person to be too righteous and say they're not going to leave anything to their children, it's going to create bad blood, and it's not going to create a good legacy for the parent. Obviously, tzedakah should definitely be included, but not at the exclusion of the children. So this means that a parent is not allowed to choose to say, well, I'm going to forego, or I'm going to forfeit, or I'm going to dispense with giving money to my children. I'm going to give it to someone else. I like my nephew. My nephew is a nice guy, and he took better care of me than my children took care of me. Or, there's a guy in shul who I really like very much, and I'm going to give it to him, or I'm going to give it to the Rav, I'm going to give it to the Rebbe, whatever it is. This is the Gemara is saying you shouldn't do that. You should give to your children. Obviously, you should give as well. Certainly, you should give tzedakah. But the question is that the pasuk says that it's a Beferish pasuk that Avram Avinu, Vayitin Avram es kol asher lo Yitzchok, that Avram Avinu gave everything that he had to one child, to Yitzchok, at the expense of his other children. L'chara, it's a pella, very, very, very troubling, because that Avram Avinu kept the Torah, whatever that means, but he kept the Torah. So how could he go against the Chazal that tell us that you're not allowed to disinherit a child? And he did that. He had Yishmael. He also had the Bnei Keturah from Hagar. And it says, V'yitin Avram es kol asher lo Yitzchak. Now the Torah does qualify that he gave something to his other children. to the Bnei Keturah. He gave them a shem. He gave them a name of Hashem. Most Rishonim say that this name was a shem of Tumah. And some of the Rishonim explain that it means that even while they were Tameh, they were allowed to use the name of Hashem. We're not 100% certain or clear. We don't have total clarity on what it means that Avram Avinu gave them the shem. What does it mean precisely? Others say that he gave them a special name that they could conjure up shadim, demons, or spirits, that could be at their service. And if they need any type of assistance or to something to facilitate on their behalf, then they could get the shadim. So there's different opinions, but we know that according to many opinions, these people were sent off to the Far East, and they functioned with this shame. They used this shame that Avraham Avinu gave them. It's still very troubling, though.
Where are they today? Do we know what religion they are?
Yeah, so Rebelsky, my Rebbe Rebelsky Zatzal, he used to say that he thought that they were perhaps Buddhists.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what was the shame?
We don't know what the shame is. We don't know what the shame is. But here's the Das Kanim. Das Kanim asks the following question. The Das Kanim says, Tema, Hechi Ovid Hochi. How could Avram Avinu disinherit his children? Because even if he gave Bnei Keturah the shame, it wasn't a tangible. It's called an intangible. It's not a tangible entity. That's not something that is a concrete. It's not certainly not it wouldn't be described as a financial asset or resource. So he says, how could he do that? The Gemara says it's usher to do that, to favor one child over another. And the Das Kanim answers, he says, a fascinating answer. He says that both Avram and Yishmael were both converts to Judaism. When they had their bris milah, remember, Avram was very old when he had his bris milah. How old was Avram when he had his bris milah?
99.
He was 99 years old, and Yishmael was 13. So at 99 and 13, they both converted to Judaism. And since they converted to Judaism, a ger doesn't inherit his father. It's totally different laws of Yerusha. He says, so since a ger doesn't inherit his father, therefore he was able to eliminate Yishmael from the bequeathment, from the inheritance. That's his answer. Now, it's interesting that the Kli Yakar has a different approach. The Kli Yakar says that kikach ratzasa, kikain ratzasa Sarah, that Sarah gave this mandate, Sarah gave a charge, and Sarah said, you only have one son, Avraham, and that's our child together, Yitzchok. And Sarah wanted to alienate and ostracize Yishmael because Yishmael was engaging in illicit behavior and in licentious behavior, and therefore she said it's unbecoming of a child of Avraham, and therefore he's not a child of Avraham. And the Rebbe Shalom seemed to affirm this, because Rebbe Shalom says, Kol Hashatam Alecha Sarah, every good husband knows this. Whatever the wife says, yes, honey, yes. And that's what we learned. The precedent was Avraham Avinu. Whatever Sarah says, you have to oblige, you have to do. And that's what Rebbe Shalom told. Listen to Sarah, listen to your wife. So when she said that you should eliminate Yishmael from the Yerusha, and it should only be Yitzchak, he should favor Yitzchak, and make him the exclusive son, therefore it seems to be that God put a stamp on it, that God affirmed it, and God gave license for it. So that's the Kli Yakar's approach, and therefore he wasn't penalized by Vayitin Avram as Kol Shalom Yitzchak, giving everything to Yitzchak. It's interesting that the Kli Yakar, by the way, he says another pshat. He says a very, really more cryptic pshat and more, I guess, esoteric pshat, because he says that he gave Yitzchak Olam Haba. In other words, according to this, perhaps he did give Yishmael something. V'yitin as kol shalom means that whatever was his raison d'etre, what the greatest emphasis he put in his personal life. And what was the greatest emphasis he put in his personal life? For him, even though he was a fabulously wealthy man, Avram, but that wasn't the extravagance and the wealth, that didn't mean anything to him. Only the world to come meant something to him. Only the eternal meant something to him. So it says when he gave to Yitzchak, when he gifted to Yitzchak, what was he gifting him? He was gifting him the legacy. And that was a spiritual inheritance, and that's what he was giving him, but not to the exclusion of also divvying up and allocating certain resources to his other children. Which seems to be a little, it's off shot. Because V'yiteres Kol Shalom seems to be, Pashup Pshat seems to be, at least the superficial reading is that what does it mean? Is that he gave him the resources. But that's the Kli Yakar. Rashi, as a fact, if you look at Rashi, Rashi also seems to concur with that. Rashi seems to also resonates with Rashi's such a pshat, I think, because Rashi says that he gave Yitzchok the koyach of bracha, because Avram was told, "V'hayei bracha," that you're going to be for such a blessing. So some Rishonim say that. What does it mean? It means that you're going to be able to bestow blessing upon others. And that's Avram is going to have the koyach of bracha, and he gave that bracha to Yitzchok to bestow blessings. And that's, by the way, Rav Miller's that's all he used to say. He used to say when you walk by, he used to take big walks for his cardiac health because he had a heart condition. And he used to take walks in the Jewish neighborhoods. And anytime he would pass by, a Jewish house or a school, and he'd see little kids or he'd see families, he'd go ahead and say, "You should be blessed." That's how he said it. "You should be blessed. You should be blessed." He says, everybody should be so beneficent. Everybody should be so magnanimous. They should walk around giving blessings to everybody. Every Jew you see, just give them, throw out blessings, And listen, it should be kind to every human being. We spoke about it Shabbos morning. It's a very important yesod that in today's day and age, you have to be nice to everybody. You never know. So after my drasha on Shabbos mornings, I spoke about Lama Tisro, that Yaakovina told his children, don't be conspicuous, don't stand out. If you have something, you have a luxury that the Goyim don't have, don't be so don't be so extravagant, don't be ostentatious, be careful. If you're living in a neighborhood that's a mixed neighborhood and you're driving, a fancy Mercedes and they look at you, it's not good. Even if you have the money, don't spend it. Be modest, be humble. So my father reminded me of the famous story of Shlomo Kalbach, that he, a beggar asked him for money, and everybody else was spitting on the beggar and, shoving the beggar. And Shlomo Kalbach, he gave the guy money, and much later on, there were these frum guys that were coming back from a basketball game. They were passing by Harlem, and the car broke down. The tire went flat, and they were stranded in the worst, in a very, very bad place. And somebody came to them. We're not mentioning, somebody came to them with a knife, and to mug them and to harm them. And out of the dark, another guy comes, and he frightens away the mugger, and he saves their lives. And he says, "You're wondering why I saved your lives?" He says, "Because," he says, "you know who Shlomo Kalbach is? He's still alive?" I said, "Yeah, of course. We love his songs." And he says, "Well, when I was decrepit, when I was down in the dumps, there was one person that took care of me and that cared about me." He says, "And that I see you're his people, and that's why I saved you." It's a Musar Haskell for today's day and age. I don't want to get into too many details, but it's something very, very important for us to recognize and realize. Anyhow, so according to Rashi, he gave them the koyach habracha. Rabbi Yashiv has a fascinating yesod, a fascinating approach of how Avram Avinu was able to go get Keneged, it seems the Torah, at least Keneged Chazal, and disinherit one of his children, Ishmael. Rabbi Yashiv says it's the same way that there's a special dispensation, a special allowance that's made to give a Yerusha to girls. Minat Torah, girls don't yarshin. Because this is not something chauvinistic. It's not something that is discriminatory necessarily. It happens to be that the fundamental of Yahadus is that it's a more paternal, and the fact is that we hope that every girl should get married, and then she is subsumed in the other ancestral right, and the other tribe, and therefore the money is supposed to stay within the male family line. That doesn't mean that the parent cannot make a gift while the parent is alive. But as far as the last will and testament, that Tzavah, technically speaking, it only goes to males, although it doesn't apply today. Because today there was an innovation which was in line with the Torah called Shtar Chatzi Zachar, which means that you can also leave behind, and it's encouraged. This is something that all the poskim say, that a person should never ever neglect a daughter in a tzavah, in a Yerusha, should also include the daughter in a Yerusha. But Rabbi Yashiv has a fascinating approach. And he says the same way that we make an allowance for a girl, and particularly for a girl in order to give a dowry so that she be someone who is very eligible to get married. She don't have to be in the shidduch crisis, which is a very hard parsha to be in for a lot of people. So therefore, the more money, unfortunately, money talks, hakesa yanas hakol, the more money, then the Chazal say that the more chance that maybe she'll have, and therefore you're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to make a allowance for the girl to also be part of whatever is being bequeathed. So Rabbi Yasha says, then certainly in such a case where Yitzchok Avinu had to get married, and it was a a little of a hardship and imposition for him to get married because they had to travel to Iraq to get him married. So the more money that he had in his estate, the better the chance that he would get married. And that's why he says, V'yitin Avram es kol shel Yitzchok. That's why he was able to give everything to Yitzchok. That's Rabbi Yashua's approach. Very interesting approach. Now, let's get back to the Shiloh at hand. So the Shiloh was, for those that came a little late, the Shiloh was that somebody asked me, I said it was a very uncomfortable and sensitive question, and not a question that you like receiving at all. And you talk a little sleep over such a Shiloh, is that somebody feels that their child has been very rude and trying to think about nice terminology, because the way the person described it wasn't so nice. I had to take away the phone but that the child was very disobedient, and the child had no respect for the parent, and the parent wanted to disinherit the child. So we said that the Chachamim say that although it's within the right of the person to masha asoi, but ein ruach chacham noicha, that the Chachamim don't like it. The Rashbam, if you look at the Rashbam, because there's no Rashi on the Basra, it's Rashbam. Rashbam even says, kemat, he uses the lashon of a curse. He says, I think if I'm not mistaken, if I remember the lashon, he says, charoin af, he says, the Rebbe Shlomo's wrath, that it's a very bad thing to do. Now, but Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that if the person doesn't behave kishura, if he doesn't behave appropriately, then zachal l'toiv, it's a good thing that he did. So how do we paskel l'maisa? How do we paskel l'maisa? But first look. How do we come out? So normally the klal and shas is that we paskin like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. But if you look on the bottom of the page of Kuflam Megimel Mebeis and Baba Basra, it's a fascinating Rishbam where he talks about the haklalim of shas, where he speaks about the different halachas of shas, and he says that although majority in most cases we would paskin like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, in this case Shmuel says shinana. He says to Rabbi Yehuda, shinana. As you impudent one, or you wise one, Shina, you sharp one. And he ends up saying, in this case, in this instance, he says that we paskin like the Chachamim, that you're not allowed to disinherit a child. Even if you don't like that child, and even the child, you're not allowed. And that seems to be the Psak Halacha. That's how we come out. Because the Rambam in Perek Vav, in Hilchos Nachlus, in the end of Perek Vav, that's chapter 6, law 11, Halacha Yud Aleph, he says, if you decide to reallocate your inheritance and give it to someone other than your child, and you leave behind your inheritor, the ones that are supposed to inherit you, so he says that even though your children or those that are supposed to inherit you are not be able, let's say God forbid, if a person doesn't have children, but he has brothers, then the law is, halacha is, the Medin Torah, Medin Nachla, Medin inheritance, is that his brothers would then get the inheritance if he doesn't have sons. And so he says he doesn't like his brothers. He wants to leave his brothers out. So it says that even though these brothers may not act appropriately or properly, Chazal, the rabbis were very adamant and aghast and appalled at such behavior. They said it wasn't appropriate. So it would work though. Notice that push comes to shove, it's a fait accompli, that it would still, you have the right to do it. And the will would still be a kosher will. Midas Chasidus, he says, but it's an extra measure of piety. But if you're an upstanding Jew, you should not participate in such a transaction. In such you should not testify, you should not be a witness on such a will, because it's going against the rabbis. Even though it would be a fait accompli, even though it would be something that would be acceptable post facto. Now, the Shulchan Aruch Paskins.
We're talking about a will that takes place at what point?
I'm sorry, what?
A will that takes place immediately after death?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
When that happens before?
Yeah, so after death, yeah.
Should be okay, huh?
Yeah.
Did the incident with Benot Tzolach change the halacha regarding women?
Well, if they're only daughters, then the halacha would be different. Right. But if there's a son and a daughter, then it would be that only the sons would yarshim in the Torah. The Shulchan Aruch comes out that, like the halacha, like Shmuel, that even if the child is not a good child, you shouldn't disinherit them. You should not disinherit them, even though Rishon Gamliel says you can. Why? What's the rationale for that? You know, the child never came to visit you, the child never called you, the child never sent you a Father's Day card, the child never sent you a birthday card.
Mary's a non-Jew.
But what's the rationale? What's the rationale to still allow the child to inherit you when the child is so disobedient and the child is such a mechutzav? So what's the rationale?
Maybe because of the blessings that the child will do for the parent and their.
They go to a non-Jew.
But it seems that the child is estranged. What?
Sooner or later, it may go to a non-Jew.
Oh, but he has other children. He's giving to other children. So the Gemara Ksuvas, Daf Nun Gimel, has a very fascinating approach. The Gemara Ksuvas says that although this child is not a good child, you never know who that child will bear. That you never know who that child's progeny or descendant will be. Who that seed, who will come from that child. Maybe a grandchild will be the saving grace. So, therefore, you should never disinherit a child because you never know, the grandchild may be better than the child was. Rav Moshe in the Chosh Mishpach Chelik Beis has a tshuva relating to this. Rav Moshe speaks about a child who went off the beaten path, who deviated from Judaism and became a heretic. Rav Moshe says that in such a case, and that seems to be the only case, a parent is justified in disinheriting a child. Now, there was a famous legal case around a few years, probably 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know if you remember, there was a famous philanthropic family, mega donors to different causes, secular family. I think they were secular, and they could have been a little traditional, and they left behind a testament that said that they were disinheriting. It was a conditional bequest, and that is that if their grandchildren did not marry Jewish, then they would not be part of the will. Which it's very interesting, and it's something that they had to be very concerned about. But Rav Moshe says that if the child becomes a heretic, that would be the only, I think, justification for disinheriting the child. Now, and Rav Moshe, he corroborates this by saying that the chance of a child of a heretic doing tshuva is so remote. And we don't have to be chayish l'miuta. We don't have to suspect for the small minority. Now, Rav Moshe wrote this tshuva as Chelik Beis. So Chelik Beis, he wrote probably in the 60s. Okay, Rav Moshe wrote this tshuva in the 60s. I don't know what.
Pre-BJX.
Right, pre-BJX, exactly. Right. So I'm saying, the fact is that there's a whole, the Baruch Hashem, there's a whole tshuva movement going on, where people, are seeing nachas from children and grandchildren that they never thought, would return back to Judaism. So I don't know, what where Moshe would hold in such a case, but it remains, I guess, it's Sorach Chiyun. It requires further investigation, further.
If you go to David Feinstein, he wouldn't be able to help you, or not really?
So I did. I consulted with great Gedolim about this case, because it bothered me very much. And again, the halacha is you shouldn't disinherit. When the parent says, "I cannot give this child money," the child is dastardly. The child, and they had a few more choice words about the child.
It causes more harm.
Well, I'm being very euphemistic. There was really,
The money may cause more harm for the child.
Oh, so if that's the case, then you could do a conditional bequest, where you could set up trustees and say, that if the child is behaving and this and that, we're talking about an adult child that turned his or her back on the parent. And, now I have to share with you, just from, quote unquote clinical experience, okay? As, not as a clinical psychologist, as a Rav, I tell you, I see a lot of situations, a lot of cases where the parent has self-inflicted injuries, where the parent contributes to the fact that the child turned their back. A lot of parents, have borderline personality, not a lot, but there are cases of parents that have borderline personality disorder where they're very narcissistic, and I meet a lot of people like this, not saying, not from here, I'm saying, from just travels, different, and they're really emotionally abusive to the kids. I'm not talking about physically abusive. Physically abusive obviously is crossing the red line, but you know what? Emotional abuse is also crossing the red line. It can be just as bad. Where if a kid grows up being told that you're an imbecile, right, and the child grows up, also where the parent acts really draconian, where the parent is overly protective and suffocates the kid, and the kid has to always live in the father or the mother's shadow, and is always subject to the fact that the kid is never good enough and this and that, then the kid will eventually turn the back on the parent. And it happens. It happens very, very often. There are poskim today that will tell certain children that you don't have to do kibbut av aim. It means that you're not allowed to go ahead and explicitly, curse the parent. You're not allowed to go ahead and cause the parent any physical or emotional harm, but that you could, in a certain sense. Again, this is not a psak, and anybody that's listening or viewing this on the web, whatever it is, please do not take any unilateral types of measures of an adam dina denavshe chas v'shalom. This is something that has to be asked to a great, posek. You have to consult. Saying, but there are situations where the child is living in abuse, and there's no mitzvah to live in abuse. And a lot of times when the parents come and the parents say, I don't want my kid to be in my will because my child, is this and that, a lot of times it's the parent's responsibility, it's the parent's fault. And the child is suffering. So therefore, to go ahead and to totally, excise and to totally cut out the child is not appropriate in many situations. You really have to know a really comprehensive diagnosis and assessment of the situation in order to make such a judgment. That's A. And B, again, the grandchildren, why should the grandchildren suffer? I know a situation where I was asked about disinheriting a child, and the grandchildren are great kids. And why should they suffer? And why should they think that grandpa, grandma, Bubby and Zaidi, or Saba and Safta despised them and detested them when it was just a relationship issue with it? So again, I asked a Shiloh to great Gedolei Poskim in this particular in Shiloh, and they told me that even though the child has turned the back on the parent should not cut out the child entirely. Should not. So I just want to qualify, and to give something. Well, they have to give the whole thing. Again, it says Masha Asa Asui. So they're entitled to do what they want, but in Ruach Chacham and Neichemenu, who wants to live with the fact that the rabbis are defaming you in a certain sense, because it says that Rashbam says there's wrath about such a judgment. So again, in this case, the psak that I said was that they should give something and not totally cut out the child. Yeah.
No, because you just brought in the Rashbam. In the next world, do the parents suffer? Is it a terrible?
Yeah, absolutely. According to Rashbam, yeah.
So we're trying to prevent the parents from suffering.
Yeah. It's a child's, absolutely, yeah. Scary, it's very frightening. Okay, any questions on this before we go further?
If you give a little bit to one, could that act in reverse, and the child you give a little really be more angry because he got so little and the other people? Isn't that a possibility?
I think, you're right, you're making a good point, but I think that better something than nothing.
Yeah, so let's say that he gets a few dollars and, he has brothers they get.
Right, so the proportion should be, right.
Wouldn't that...
Right, so I think the best thing is it has to be in some way commensurate, but you can't force a person to go against their emotions, it's a very hard situation, if the parent feels so betrayed and violated, and you could tell them, well, give your hard-earned money to that child that you hate, that hates you, whatever it is. There's a lot of emotions there, and that's why we have a Torah. That's why we have guidance, because if everything was left to our emotions, then we'd all be probably killing each other. Think about it. And think about just on the road, rage. Think about, road rage, right? And driveways and all these shagassins, right? I mean, people go crazy about the silliest, most petty, foolish things, right? So, Baruch Hashem, we have a Torah to guide us that tells us hopefully to be peaceful and kind, Yeah.
The philanthropic family you mentioned, who they said that the children would only get the money if they married Jewish people. Is any of that based in halacha, or is that just secular?
No, I mean, according to Rav Moshe, it seems that it may be based on halacha as well. Yeah. And according to halacha, it seems that halacha would say you're allowed to set up trustees to guide the inheritance, in other words, according to your specific parameters.
Or they get it at like a certain age.
Right. But more than that, they're talking about conditions. Like conditions that meet your criteria for how they should be behaving or something.
Where's the source of that?
So it's based on different. I think the Chabiner has a tshuva that.
Where's he getting that from?
So it's based on a. I think you may have missed it. We discussed before you came here.
Sorry.
So what?
If a person only had one child and their condition was a son, and their condition was that they had to say Kaddish for them for 10 months or something?
11, at least 11, maybe 12.
So they wouldn't have said it, but the condition is that they have to say it. So they do it for the inheritance. Would that elevate the person's neshama, or not really, because they're sort of in a way being coerced into doing it?
Doesn't make a difference.
Just
Kaddish is
the same as
Kaddish.
you're saying it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're not doing lishma for the Kaddish, they're doing it for the gain inheritance.
That's what he's asking.
Right.
That's really what he's asking.
Right, he said that you'll get the inheritance only if you say Kaddish for me.
I think he's going up in mind.
And he wouldn't have said it.
They're still saying Yiskadav, Yiskadash, right? Their Baruch should be elevated, should be made holy, and I think and the people answering, the people answering have no idea, hopefully. It's internal business, never wash dirty laundry in public. Keep it amongst yourself,
You pay people to say Kaddish.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's perfectly fine.
That's a shiloh in halacha. If you're allowed to, because we paskin, you're allowed to pay people to say kaddish. So there's machlokes between Rabbi Yasher and Shlomo Zalman. If you're allowed to pay one person to say multiple kaddish, let's say one person saying for like say 10 different people, do you have to have kavanah for one particular person? It's a machlokes. Many poskim say that it's okay that to have to say for multiple people. Others saying that no, it should be directed for one person. That's machlokes. Yeah.
You know where there's proof of it maybe is I'll say very quickly, I was in a class and the rabbi said if a person puts a blindfold on their head and tells someone to put tefillin on their arm, and they put it on their arm and their head, and they have like an amazing chakras and they pray so much, and then they take off the blindfold, it turns out it was a banana peel. Do they get anything from that? Yeah, they might, but they don't get from putting on tefillin because it's not about what their intention was, it was about what they did. So I'm thinking maybe although the person's intention was...
Well, it's a Beferish Gemara. It's a Gemara in Brachas, actually. Daf Yomi had it, that if somebody does something... Where's the Gemara in Brachas? You want to give me a Gemara in Brachas? Brachas, please. The Gemara in Brachas there?
The last one on the right.
Brachas 1? Which one on the
Brachas 1, yeah.
So I'm
we had
thinking what you're saying
a few
makes
days ago
sense.
now.
Yeah. I see. Thank you.
One banana peel.
Choshev says Beferish Gemara. It's a Gemara Brachas Daf Vavam and Alf. The Gemara says Choshev Adam Lasas Mitzvah V'Nenas. A person wanted to do a mitzvah, but he was under some kind of case of duress, or there was some kind of accident that happened V'Nenas, and he was prevented from doing the mitzvah of Mala V'Kas V'Kilasa. So the Torah equates it that as if he did the mitzvah. So then the Gemara goes further, but you see from here that if a person had in zin, that he had a kavanah, he had intention to do a mitzvah, and he was prevented from doing the mitzvah, the Torah equates it as if he's done the mitzvah. So interesting that the shiloh is that the Menashe Klein had the shiloh in his Chuvas Shine Halachas, I think, about a guy that was putting on tefillin his whole life, and then he discovered, he put it in to the sofer to examine, and he discovered it was puzzle. So did he get a mitzvah or not? So he wants to prove from here that the Gemara says Beferish, if you want to do a mitzvah and you were nenas. Now, it happens to be that if he was derelict and he went, when he bought the tefillin, he was looking for a bargain. Happens to be, I went with somebody recently to buy tefillin, and he wanted a good bargain, and I was very disappointed, because he wasn't getting the appropriate tefillin, and he was fighting over them, whatever. It didn't, so if it was a guy like that, and he really didn't get the choice tefillin, and then it turns out he discovers later on that the tefillin were puzzle, then maybe he should have responsibility for that, and the mitzvah shouldn't work. Or if he exposed it to, let's say, extreme temperatures, tefillin was, let's say, in the car when it was, below frigid, below zero temperature, or it was extreme heat, and he never took it to a sofer, then I don't know if this Gemara would apply. I'm talking about a normal case where a person did his due diligence and was always careful. Halachically, strictly speaking, a person never has to check his tefillin. You have a chiyuv, according to most Rishonim. Ruba de Ruba and the halacha l'mai says that you don't have to check tefillin. There's a das yochad that says you do have to. Tefillin, mezuzah, obviously you have to. Mezuzah you have to check twice in every 3.5 years, but tefillin you don't have to. But I always recommend that people get the tefillin checked. If there's a certain period of time, they should get it checked, because most people do travel. Whether you're going through, the metal detectors in the airport, you never know what radiation does, right? I'm just exaggerating, saying. But whatever it is, put on the airplane. Okay, so Menashe Klein wants to say that you see from here that if you want to do a mitzvah, even though you were totally bereft of the mitzvah, you still get the mitzvah. Rabbi Yashiv argues, by the way, Rabbi Yashiv holds that you can't say if a person didn't have the mitzvah his whole life. He says, this is not talking about the person was never fulfilling the mitzvah. It means that in some way, some capacity, the person did get the mitzvah, did fulfill the mitzvah. Not if the person doesn't have the mitzvah at all. You can't create what doesn't exist. If the mitzvah was actually totally invalid, then you cannot create what doesn't exist. Okay, but that's a good point to complement what Max was saying. Yeah.
We just learned that if you run to learn, if you run to learn, is the mitzvah running to learn or is it learning? We did that in the recent doc, and you said you got the merit for. The mitzvah was actually for running to learn. So it's not really, so you could get
the effort. Credit. You're saying for the effort that you expended.
So you did the effort.
Excellent. Okay, that's a very good point. Okay, all right, well taken.
They didn't get the mitzvah, but they got
They got for the preparation. All right.
Okay. You may get a mitzvah for putting tefillin on, but you don't get the ought from the tefillin actually, right?
Right.
So it's still a problem, no?
I think so.
They're using God's name in vain also.
But Shkoch Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nivra. Okay. Next shiloh. The next shiloh revolves around this one is just a little more entertaining. A little lighter. About somebody asked, why is there a custom? If you go to chasanas, you see that a lot of times the chassan puts on a raincoat. And is it because they used to have outdoor chuppahs? And I attended a wedding this past week, and it was raining and cold, and they're diehards. Because the Ramah says that it's better to get married outdoor, tachas k'chuchavim, under the stars. Why? The Rishonim explained because Avraham Avinu was given the blessing that your children should be like the stars, and therefore it's very auspicious to get married under the stars, because the same way the stars scintillate and illuminate, so too should your progeny illuminate and scintillate. And you have the same way that stars are innumerable and very tremendous. So you should be as populous and multiple and innumerable as the stars. Many brachas associated with the stars. The Rambam says that every star has an neshama, has a soul. We don't know what that means exactly, but obviously there's something powerful about the stars. So the Sfardim are not makbid to get married outdoors or even with a skylight, but Ashkenazim are makbid to get married where there's a skylight or where there's some kind of outdoors. In many instances, if it's not possible, it's not possible. It's not halacha. It's just a siman bracha. And a person doesn't have to necessarily, switch plans over it. Certainly not, cancel the shidduch over it, but change wedding halls over it. But it's something that we do take, under consideration. So there is a minhag in Klal Yisrael amongst the Yakis. The German Jews don't have it. A lot of Middle Eastern Jews don't have it, to wear kittel at the chasna. To wear a kittel is a special robe or vestment that is worn on Yom Kippur. It's a white robe, and because some say that it's a sign of purity. That the others say that it's a sign of kapara, of atonement. That we were on Yom Kippur, it's a sign of atonement, it's a sign of humility. Others say that it's reminiscent of the shrouds that we wear upon death. We wear special, it's called tachrichin. Tachrichin are shrouds, and therefore a person at the height of their simcha, the height of their merriment and jubilation, when they're getting married, they should not be conceited and bombastic. They should be as humble as possible, and therefore they're reminded about their day of death. So that's why, by the way, under the chuppah, the person is not supposed to clothe himself in the kittel. The chassan is not supposed to wear the kittel himself, because the same way a person cannot put on his own tachrichim. If you could show me a person that puts on his own tachrichim, that's pretty good. You better take the person out of the coffin then and bring him back. I mean, it's a lot. So the halacha is that we actually go ahead and chaver kadisha, that you put the robe on the dead man. So too, because it's reminiscent of tachrichim, somebody puts a robe on the chassan. He doesn't put it on his own. Now there's another minhag that says that if he's wearing the coat or if he's wearing the kittel, particularly the coat, that he should do it with a bare shoulder. In other words, to wear it where you don't have it on both shoulders, the coat, but it's hanging off of one shoulder. It's not on both shoulders. Right? And what's that based on? So that's based on the fact that it's a Zecher L'Chorban, it's reminiscent of the destruction of the temple. And the same way in Avel, we don't conduct ourselves like that, but initially, in the time of the Kadmonim, I think, so the way that in Avel, a mourner conducted him or herself was that, or particularly a man, a woman, it may be a problem, was that they would bear their shoulder. They wouldn't wear a full jacket, and they would bear one of their shoulders to show it was a sign of mourning. And so in line with wearing the shrouds under the wedding, they say that until you get married, you're incomplete, and once you get married, you're finished. Right? Saying, this sounds like, why is a wedding all about? Well, we have somebody who's getting married a week from today. Not scared. No, saying, but why is a wedding? No, it should be that you should be sober. In other words, to sober you, because you understand that there's nothing like getting married, that it's such a simcha. And that it's incomparable. Therefore, you have to, you may get a little drunken from you may be in a stupor from it. So therefore, in order to sober the person, to make sure that they're level-headed and they understand the consequence, that how holy it is, and that their simcha has to be incomplete, because you say this is the height of their simcha, it's the pinnacle of the existence. Therefore, to sober them up, they have to realize, one second, we're not complete, we're imperfect because we don't have the temple, because we don't have the shechin in us, and therefore they have to. That's why they bear the shoulder. Now, yeah.
You step on the glass.
No, we step. That's why we step in the glass. Exactly.
That's not enough.
That's why Rav Moshe was against. I think Rabelski said it also that we step in the glass and everybody says Mazel Tov. The stepping in the glass is supposed to be part of the mourning. It's not supposed to be, I guess it's just, part of the choreography, and it's part of, just synchronizing it. When are you supposed to say Mazel Tov then? It's the last thing that you do, right? So, but it's really inappropriate. If you think about it, it's mamash inappropriate. But I guess, the best thing would be is that there should be like this real pregnant pause after the breaking the glass. And everybody just reflects again, or the meshkach, and then you say everybody should say. Then somebody sends out this flare, and then everybody says Mazel Tov.
Put on crickets.
Something, but why? So what's pshat with the raincoat? You see that a lot of chassan, they walk down the aisle. You'll see if you go to a really religious wedding, so Lithuanians do it. It's really Hungarian minhag. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think that the Litvish.
It's
What?
Litvish.
The Litvish.
It's a Litvish building.
No, I'm saying the Litvish do it also. But I think it started out Hungarian, and now the Litvaks do it also. In the yeshivish world, they do it.
It's an actual raincoat?
Polish, they don't do what?
They get a chance to wear black. They wear black. Right?
So I mean, it looks a little odd. It looks a little odd because he's wearing the kittel. On top of the kittel, he's wearing this raincoat.
What are the Yerushalmi?
And they're indoors. It's not. I mean, it's an indoor chuppah. I'm talking about not the outdoor chuppah.
In Israel? What do they do in Israel? They wear it?
I don't remember.
How old is this?
Remember? You remember?
Everyone's
different.
How old is this practice?
I just went to one.
Oh, yeah.
It was raining during the cooking, so.
Say, this. He went to one where it was raining during the chuppahs. The guy wore a raincoat. Yeah, okay, let's go. But that was over here though. It looks strange. It looks strange. Yeah.
I had one.
You wore one.
The Sarah Kedusha photos, and you put ashes on my head also.
Right. So ashes we do. Ashes it's almost universal to do the ashes. To put the ashes on you're ruining the guy's perfect hairdo. Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting. One time I was putting the ashes, and the guy said to me, "It's a toupee. Be careful." I think he was joking. No, you have to put it on the forehead. The ash is supposed to go on the forehead, and people are careful. They just they got the whole the salon, and they got their hair done and everything. Anyhow, so if a guy has a receding hairline, it's not so bad. Anyhow, but so what's shot in the overcoat is that it's brought down that. If it's the guy's personal Yom Kippur, and the day of the wedding is Yom Kippur, he's doing tshuva. It's a day of atonement when he gets married. That's why all his sins are forgiven, and he has to fast. So he shouldn't broadcast that to the public. It shouldn't be something that has to be for the masses. That's something that's very, very discreet and something that should be concealed, something that should be very modest and intimate. And that's why he covers the kittel, because the kittel is between him and God, and maybe his kala, and therefore they cover it. Others say that, it's not something that we're concerned about, that everybody understands that the kittel represents, not only, it doesn't represent the Yom Kippur, but also represents the purity. And the same with the kala wears white, the chassan wears white, but that's what it's, basically, that's what it's based on. And there's different minhagim. All minhagim are kodesh, are holy, and everybody should be every minhag should be respected. We shouldn't look askance. We shouldn't look down upon anything. Everything should be held with the highest regard. Okay. All right. So I do have another shiloh, but I guess it's already late, so I don't want to keep anybody. So Be'ez Hashem, we'll take any questions now, and we'll save the next one for the last shiloh for next week. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody, just give it an opportunity. Anybody have a question before? Okay. Yeah.
I've heard that they wore this coat because of anti-Semitism. Like they didn't want to broadcast to the world like what was going on and draw attention to themselves. Is that not also a reason?
I never heard that. I never heard that. Not familiar with that. Okay. Okay, Zayik Zon, everybody. But you know what the minute? You know what they do there?